I think the theme for the next couple weeks of videos, barring the part where I completely divert all conversation to talk about scale model numbers, is going to be questioning who the real main character of Xenoblade Chronicles X is. Obviously, you are required to have your own avatar in the party for the entirety of the game, but Elma is the one used as the mascot for everything, and is the representative for Xenoblade X whenever one character is allowed to show up in things crossing over the entire series. But then also, in my opinion, Lyn is the one who changes and develops and influences people the most throughout the actual story of X. So there's a lot of stuff you can talk about there, but today is Elma's video, so we're going to primarily talk about her, especially in relation to all the new content, so spoilers for everything in Xenoblade X Definitive Edition. While I don't agree with the criticism that Elma is completely sidelined and made irrelevant in the epilogue to focus on Al, I do agree that you don't really learn a lot more directly about her throughout Chapter 13. She is primarily an exposition dispenser, primarily just bringing up things that in-universe she happened to always know, but had never said anything about until now because the writers didn't think of that until DE. That being said though, I think we were given a lot of small pieces of context about Elma and her background that allow us to understand why she is the way she is a lot better than one might think at first glance. So we are going to go over all that, and then there is one very, very important lore thing that I'd also like to discuss at the end of the video, and that is whether or not Elma's planet was in the same universe as Earth or a completely different one. But we'll get back to that at the end, and for now we are going to talk about her as a character because that is the main point of these character file videos. While I do think it's funny to keep making fun of the somewhat clumsy way exposition is handled in Chapter 13, I do think it is natural for Elma's character progression for her to feel more comfortable with sharing this stuff than she was in the original game. Not only has she already gotten a lot closer to everyone, but she's already shared her biggest secret with them, so it's not like there's anything else she can pull out that's going to surprise people too much. And also, Al is back. She and Lyn seem to have already realized that Al is still alive before you even head back to NLA after fighting the ghosts for the first time, so pretty much every character decision after that, even before Al shows up, is predicated on the fact that he's back. And that, I think, is the key. Now, however you choose to interpret Elma and Al's relationship, and whether or not he's actually the person Elma was closest to prior to the start of the game, he is the only person who would be able to get her to open up in the way that he does. I think there is a very good chance that she knew at least Nagi and Vandam for almost, if not as long as she knew Al, but both of those guys have completely different personalities to him, and wouldn't bring out this somewhat happier, less serious side of her like Al does. And that's not just because Vandam and Nagi are serious like Elma usually is, and Al is a lot more goofy and lighthearted, but also because Vandam and Nagi were not presumed dead for the entirety of the main game. In retrospect, I think it's very easy to view Elma being a lot more no-nonsense and serious, and being less willing to open up to people, as an expression of both depression and survivor's guilt from Al being lost in the battle over Mira. In my opinion, this is an aspect of her character that, while it was not really touched on a lot in the original game, was being thought about by the writers prior to DE, because Elma in Xenoblade 2 alludes to the hero and references being friends with him a whole lot more than she did in the original game. Why, though, would she be like this because of Al and not anyone else? Clearly other people important to her have died because, you know, her entire planet did, and most likely some more in front of her than Al was, given how Al wasn't dead at all in the first place. We'll use Danny and Boris as an example because they were also members of her team who died prior to the start of the game. They were killed by one of the bosses from the Affinity mission, Then and Now, which one it actually is contradicted between the game and the art book, weirdly enough. But Elma doesn't beat herself up quite as much about them as she does with Al, right? Wrong, actually. When the Demise Ictus, the boss responsible for killing them in the game continuity, shows up, Elma gets uncharacteristically reckless and tries to send the rest of the team away so she can fight it herself. And then later on, after defeating it, she acknowledges that was the wrong move, and then also says that Danny and Boris died due to her poor judgment. She is absolutely blaming herself for their deaths, Even though it's what is implied to be an extremely powerful enemy that it's not likely that they ever would have been able to take on prior to the start of the game. And then she did get stronger, come back, and take revenge for her companions later with her new team. She was most likely beating herself up about this the entire main story of the game up until this Affinity mission, when she was finally able to actually open up to Lyn and Cross a little bit about it. Ultimately though, Danny and Boris were soldiers who joined Blade of their own free will, knowing full well that each mission would be putting their lives on the line. In some ways, they were prepared to die if it came to it, and I think Elma, as a consummate soldier herself, would respect that. Why was Al different though? He was also a soldier. He was a member of the predecessor organization to Blade. Why was this a bigger deal? Well, Elma blames herself for that as well, but not in the sense that, oh, it was her bad order that got Danny and Boris killed. Elma thinks she should have been the one piloting the Ares that day in the first place. This is the entire point of the first conversation her and Al have together in Act 1. She's acting cold to him, not because she's annoyed at him, but because she doesn't know how to approach him after what she perceives as forcing him to take up the Ares, become the hero against his wishes, and do what should have been her job for her, including seemingly dying in the battle over Mira. Elma's choices led to Danny and Boris getting killed on that one mission, and she might be being too hard on herself. We never see a flashback to that. There's a good chance that it wasn't her giving a bad order that resulted in them dying in the first place, but it was their choice to sign up for the military, to train, to join Blade. They probably would have been able to refuse transferal to Elma's team as well, and all of that stuff. It was, however, much more due to Elma's choices that Al ended up the way he did. With or without her, he would have definitely become an important scout pilot to the Coalition military, but if it wasn't for Elma's choices piloting the Ares, her machine, alongside him and teaching him how to do it on his own, there's no way he would have even been able to make the sacrifice he did over Mira in the first place. All of those emotions you see her display in the epilogue that are not present anywhere else in the game were internalized, along with internalizing every other ally she'd lost along the way, along with internalizing the loss of her entire planet, which I don't think 30 years on Earth is enough time to get over that fully, all trapped behind the fact that she needed to keep secret certain truths about Project Exodus, and the truth that she was not from Earth led her to put up a whole bunch of walls and not really display who she truly was to anyone until after Chapter 12 of the original game. Like, if you thought the greatest hero of a different planet got killed piloting a mech that you should have been in by right of the fact that it was from your own planet, of which you're the sole survivor, I think you would also be a bit more withdrawn and not willing to open up to people for a very long time until something like the ray of sunshine that is Lin Li Ku, and also maybe Cross, depending on how you headcanon your own character, were able to get her out of that shell, and then Al coming back was enough of a boost to get her to open up fully. Elma is more outwardly philosophical and emotional than a lot of the Earthlings in Chapter 13, compared to how they were in the base game, and I do think that was an intentional writing choice that is noticeable. I wouldn't say Elma has a lot of character development throughout the entire story of X, even including the epilogue, but she does noticeably change, even if that change is technically regressing back to how she was before this most recent batch of trauma happened. Tangentially related to Mr. Barnholt, Al calls Elma Princess, and weirdly enough, even though we get the backstory info dump from Elma, we don't learn anything about her actual background to tell why he calls her that. Is she actually a princess of some sort, or is it just that Al's biggest role model is Han Solo? Now, he's absolutely a massive Star Wars fan either way, but you know what I mean. Just think about how unusual this is. XDE brought back the lore database from the Xenosaga games for the first time in Blade, and includes Chapter 13, which throws a bunch more terms and proper nouns at you, and yet we never learn the name of Elma's planet, the name of Elma's species, or even the original name of Elma herself. I always assumed Elma was a name she chose to blend in better with Earthlings, and that her original name was something that was very obviously noticeable as out of the ordinary or just unpronounceable by humans. And yet, if we were going to learn any of this information, it would have been in this exact exposition dump unless we somehow get an Elma prequel game or anime or whatever down the line. I think this, when combined with a few other things she says, can actually shed a little bit of light on Elma's civilization and a little bit more of how she turned out the way she does. The first thing is something from the original game. Elma's final heart-to-heart, going home. One dialogue option changes completely depending on whether or not you finish Chapter 12. This heart-to-heart has to do with the fact that Team Elma's floor in the Blade Barracks is larger than any other team's, and you're given the option to ask why Elma was given special treatment. If you haven't finished Chapter 12, she'll give a non-answer and deflect like any other time prior to beating the game, but if you have finished it, she'll explain that, yes, it is because she is an alien and not due to any other heroics, and that her knowledge of Earth culture and customs isn't perfect, so she has to have her own special floor surrounded by only people she can trust so that she doesn't accidentally give things away. Little bit weird that she says this when you can in fact bring her out in public in her true form, but I guess that is just a gameplay abstraction that never canonically happens. And I guess all the other party members find out eventually because they're close to her, so she is able to openly talk about being an alien in things like Act 3 when she's addressing all of the members of Blade's strike team. But even then, that seems like she's talking to a lot of generic Blades as well, so I guess the truth does eventually come out. But I think I'm digressing here, I'm not even sure anymore. Honestly though, I think that statement is pretty incongruous with how Elma's portrayed everywhere else. She says she's unfamiliar with Earth culture and customs, but she's been on Earth for about 30 years, and her cover story is that she's a 29-year-old, so she's had just as much, if not more time to learn about culture and customs as someone the age she's pretending to be. I'm not sure if already being an intelligent adult is an advantage or disadvantage due to brain development stuff when it comes to learning languages and things like that, but she is also pretending to be American. I'm pretty sure she was able to learn about humanity enough to pass as at least a dumb, clueless American in that period of time, but again, she might just be self-conscious and too hard on herself, because while there are hints in the game that Elma's not human, they're hints that are telegraphed by narrative foreshadowing that's only really noticeable to the player, and not Elma tripping up on something that she should know no problem that would cause any of the actual in-universe characters to be suspicious. Plus, I'm pretty sure, like, Nagi, Maurice, Vandem, and Al already knew anyway. She's able to recite a relevant Bible verse at will, and I would not be surprised if she familiarized herself with many other religious texts from around the Earth during her time there, so I'm really not sure what she's getting at here. I have mentioned this before, but the one thing that really jumps out to me as a very big implicit cultural difference between Elma's planet and Earth is the nature of that people's relationship to the planet itself. Elma doesn't seem to really care about it as a planet or as a home, other than the fact that it is where her and her people lived, and it's gone now. Humans, on the other hand, across culture, geography, and history, have always personified the land on which we live, and the concept of Mother Earth, or something analogous to it, is almost omnipresent across the world. In this same speech, Elma also implies that she traveled the universe, possibly visiting a lot of different planets on the way to Earth, and it seems like Earth doing this is completely unique. Like, the only people who care about their planet in this specific way are the Earthlings, and then those on Mira who were influenced by the Earthlings to love Mira as humans loved Earth. If anything, it seems like this compassion the planet Earth herself showed Elma when she arrived is the reason she's so accepting of all people and wants to understand cultures and bring people together the way she does. This could heavily imply that her original planet was a lot more homogenous when it came to culture and stuff like that. She talks about them like they were enlightened, extremely good scientists, but also peaceful and not getting into the affairs of other races. So maybe they were just straight up isolationists who didn't deal with people from other planets a whole lot at all before the Ganglion showed up. Yeah, they were peaceful, advanced, and maybe even post-scarcity, but I think there's a good chance Elma's people were also kind of detached and sterile when it came to interacting with each other and their surroundings. Contrast with the Samarians, who were also heavily advanced and seemingly reached some form of enlightenment, but also still did things like the huge baptism-like ceremony we see with Baby Void in his flashback. We don't know if the Samarians were evil overall, but it does seem like Elma's people, while they were successful and peaceful and advanced, didn't necessarily take the best lessons from being descended from them, while at least the best of humanity did. Yeah, a lot of people are evil, and a lot of the good people were left behind when Earth was destroyed, leaving only the worst of the worst to come to Mira, but that love still remained. Even if humans, the Elmanoids, and the Samarians all came from the same place initially, it seems like only humanity had exactly that. Humanity. Or the specific type of empathy that allows you to accept someone even from another world. And that had somehow been baked into the planet itself, which might even explain why Void and the Ganglions specifically went for Earth and not any other planet in the universe that happened to have Samarian descendants on it. Granted, they did also go after the Chlorians already, and I'm of the opinion that the Chlorians are other Samarian descendants, so maybe Earth humans were the only ones left in that universe who hadn't been exterminated or nearly exterminated by Void's will. It also seems to me like both the Samarians and Elma's people would have referred to themselves as enlightened, given how far they'd come technologically speaking. And I think this will need to be its own video eventually. I am still of the opinion the Samarians are Earth humans from a universe we've yet to see, who advanced far further than any other human civilization in the Xeno series. I don't think end of chapter 13 Elma still thinks that about her own people. And while I don't think she thinks that about humanity either, it seems to me that she views human compassion and the will to carry on and keep surviving as a way to achieve enlightenment, again touched on in her final speech to the members of Blade. And it seems like she's congratulating the humans for figuring that out, not congratulating them on reaching the level she's already made it to, so it seems like she does not consider herself to be enlightened yet. She was fleeing, looking for safe havens from her destroyed world until she encountered the humans, and they taught her this specific brand of compassion that was then leading her with the rest of them towards enlightenment. So it doesn't seem like she views herself as superior to them or having advanced past them in any metaphysical way, just because she's fleeing her third destroyed planets and the humans are only on their second. What it does seem like, though, is she views Al, post his special experience in the Rift, as the closest to this hypothetical enlightened Samarian descendant that she seems to have in her mind, and or everyone on the White Whale 2 who experienced going through the Rift. We only saw that from Al's perspective, so we don't really know what everyone else saw, but it seems like they too were fundamentally changed by that experience. So there is a good chance that they all were fundamentally changed in some way like Al was the first time through there, and maybe this is that enlightenment Elma seeks. None of this means that I expect Elma's MO to change in any future games to appear in. Like, she's not gonna make the rapid shift and become this philosopher queen who's heavy into weird mysticism stuff around the Rift and the Multiverse. She's still gonna be Elma and doing Elma things, but I do think her having opened up to everyone is going to be consistent, and she's not going to put the mask back up and go back to her detached, serious personality, even if she runs into a large group of people she's never met before, like, say, cast members from a different Xenoblade game. Blade's purpose hasn't really changed, they're just on a different planet that they weren't on before, and I guess the Reclaimer division is going to be reshuffled and either changed in its purpose or redistributed amongst the other divisions because there's no White Whale wreckage to gather this time. But other than that, Elma's still just going to be doing normal Elma things as a leader of a Blade team that may or may not still include Cross, depending on how they want to include that character in the future games in the series that follow up on X, but that is another different topic that probably doesn't need its own video. Anyway though, in spite of how long this video is, I do think that Elma is largely a static character who the plot happens around and because of, rather than someone who is substantially shaped by the events that happened to her. All the major events in her life that shaped her personality and changed her outlook on things already happened on Earth, and that is not a bad thing at all. Elma's role as a major character is not in the traditional protagonist who's shaped by the world and their experiences like in the other Xenoblade games. Her job is as a mentor to both Lyn and Cross, helping them understand things more, helping Cross seemingly become as enlightened as Al is by the end of the epilogue, and helping shape Lyn into the person she is today, who, when she gets her video, I'm going to have to talk a lot about how that's extremely, extremely important to literally everything on Mira. All this goes to say, I don't think the Elma we see next time is going to be substantially different to the one we leave off at chapter 13 or even chapter 12. You're not going to have to fear her getting changed a whole lot because her development has happened and she's actually pretty old as far as characters go. Again, we learn absolutely nothing about her species, but it seems like they age pretty slowly because Elma was on Earth for about 30 years. Seems like she looked about the same the entire time because the flashback of her coming to Earth has her looking exactly the same as she does when she comes out of a Lifehold core, and that means she was an adult when she left her planet. We don't even know how long she was in space getting to Earth. And she wasn't just an adult, she was a competent adult. Her people entrusted her with the Ares to go to Earth. This wasn't a case of her stealing it or anything. She was chosen like Al was later chosen to be the Ares pilot. So she must have been either a very good Skell pilot or a very competent scientist. All in all, I could see her having been promoted a little bit and just getting a different job title in general, and probably using her true form and not her mimeosome more regularly. But other than that, good old Colonel Elma is still gonna be the woman she's always been when next we see her. Oh, and one last thing. Why does she have an art called Ghost Factory when she has zero connection with the ghosts? Yeah, they were there when her planet was destroyed, but her primary beef is with the Samar Federation anyway. For whatever reason, to me, Ghostwalker never really struck me as a, oh, this might be connected to the faction called the Ghosts, but Ghost Factory was, primarily because I had some theories about how the ghosts were made way back in the day that have not been completely disproven by DE. So, I don't know. Maybe I am just thinking too much about a random art name that happens to be an iconic one, because it is very powerful. Speaking, though, of Elma being a brilliant fighter and also potentially a brilliant scientist, let's talk about parallel universes one more time. We know absolutely as a fact that Xenoblade X's full story takes place over at least 3 universes. All the gameplay is in Mira's universe, which is heavily implied to be a pocket dimension and not something the size of our own universe, while some of the opening cutscene takes place in Earth's universe, and chapter 13 ends off in a brand new, completely unknown universe. There's also the rift between universes from which you can gaze into other ones, and Al was able to see into the other Xenoblade games from there, but I'm not really counting that, even though it is very possible the Chapter 13 universe is one of those from another game. We also know Elma's planet was destroyed in a 3-way battle between her people, including the original Ares, the Ganglion, and the Ghosts, which are the exact same factors that caused Earth and its entire universe to be destroyed a few decades later. So the question is, did Elma's planet exist in a completely different universe to Earth? Or was it actually just a far-off planet in the same universe like Elma says? Keep in mind, Elma says this before Al rejoins the party and long before everyone analyzes the Ares data to determine that Mira was in a different universe to Earth. We do also know as a fact that Elma's people were somehow aware that other descendants of Samar existed and sent Elma out to go warn them and bring them Ares tech, but we don't know how they figured that out. The Ganglion at that point in time were led by Void, so it is very possible they only heard about other Samarian descendants through them, because Void would know and would be able to cross universes to go get them. And we know the Ares could cross over, possibly even subconsciously. What then is the issue with Elma's world being a different one from humanity's? Well, the first thing is adding an additional universe that only gets destroyed a long time before the beginning of the game, for the purpose of making one character's backstory even more tragic than it already was, is a little convoluted and probably unnecessarily complicated for what's going on here. And then secondly, if the Ares transferred between universes, wouldn't Earth's scientists, even if not initially, eventually, be able to analyze the Ares data just like they did on Mira when Al came back, to determine that other universes existed and the Ares came from one? That's the only thing. If Elma transferred universes to get to Earth, she was not aware she did so, while Al pretty clearly was. We don't know specifics, but maybe being in the rift for an extended period of time is what gives the Ares the data signatures necessary to register as having traveled between universes or something like that. And because Elma would have done it subconsciously rather than as a result of getting shot like what happened with Al, she would have just blipped through instantaneously rather than getting stuck in the rift like happened to Al. And that changed things, or something like that. Al's narration in the final cutscene says, "The ghosts and ganglion fighting led to the destruction of Elma's world, along with its universe." Now this sounds pretty definitive, but led to is the one thing that might just imply that Elma being from a different universe is not explicit canon, unless this is a little bit differently worded in Japanese, of course. We also can't say for certain when during the battle Elma actually left. If she departed before the planet exploded, then there's a very, very good chance that she did not transfer between universes to get to Earth. But if she was still, say, in the gravity well of her planet when the planet was destroyed, then yeah, that probably would indicate the entire universe was destroyed, and just like what happened with the white whale, the energy of that explosion shunted her over the barrier into another universe. We also don't know for sure what the ghost's exact motivation is, other than punishing people who use too much conduit power. It's very possible that one of their goals was not letting Void get the Ares back himself, and the reason they destroyed Earth's entire universe was because there was nowhere else for the Ares to go, and Void was about to get his hands on it if they didn't do something like that. In that case, maybe they saw Elma escape her planet with the Ares under Void's nose and only destroy the planet, or at least fight off the Ganglion and Elma's people instead, and that led to the destruction of the planet, because they knew she could leave and hide out somewhere. Without Void, are the ghosts even still going to be following the cast of Xenoblade X into this new world, unless they start overusing the Ares again, which I don't think they will? I'm not sure. If Mira is a pocket dimension, then yeah, that explains why the ghosts destroyed the entire universe there. Not only did Void get the most powerful part of the Ares very, very quickly, but there also wouldn't even be a place for the people with the Ares to run to in the first place, other than maybe escaping into another universe like they did. We'll need to wait for a future game to see, but it's very possible the ghosts don't even hate life in general, and are simply just willing to kill to get conduit power out of people's hands. Ultimately, while I completely understand the stance, and I would not be surprised at all if it ends up being proven true in a future game, I am still of the opinion that Elma's world was in a different universe to Earth, despite the additional convolutions. While you can interpret Al's words as him saying that there was a battle between the Ganglion and Ghost over Elma's homeworld, and because of that battle, eventually that planet got destroyed, and eventually the entire universe got destroyed when they also fought over Earth and destroyed that, the fact that he didn't mention Earth at all in that statement, and honestly didn't really mention Earth at all during this entire sequence, as well as the fact that he specifically refers to this universe as the universe that held Elma's homeworld, just suggests to me that it is a completely different one. While it's complicated, I do like this interpretation more, because that means there are Sumerian descendants in multiple universes, and they're not just all on the White Whale 2 now. At any other point in time, anywhere else in the series, we could just start a completely new storyline on a completely new planet that is entirely disconnected from any other game in the Xeno series so far, besides the fact that they have a distant common ancestor with some people from Xenoblade X. And that leaves us with one other question that I am not about to answer today. We know X takes place in the same multiverse as the other Xenoblade games because it's shown directly on screen in Chapter 13, but what we don't know is whether there is a Sumerian connection behind the backstory of those games as well. I'll leave you to think on that, and until next time, this is Luxon, signing off.